Again, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, Mayor Pierre, members of the CRA Governing Board. I'd like to talk about the Oviedo Community Redevelopment Agency Budget Workshop this evening for fiscal year 16-17. A couple items on the agenda, 4 main points. We're going to talk about our current year budget adjustments. We're going to talk about fiscal year 16-17, get some direction from the CRA Governing Board regarding next year's projects. Part 3, we're going to talk about updating the CRA plan. Why update the CRA plan now? And then Part 4, we're going to request some direction for general consensus for the June 6th budget workshop. Part 1, current budget year adjustments. Ms. Hayes and myself sat down and worked through some budget year adjustments to bring the budget up to date with regards after a mid-year review of the CRA budget and the revenues that have been collected thus far. What this represents is an update of the available TIF revenues and the reimbursement to the general fund for services that were previously rendered that were paid for through the general fund. The TIF has been reimbursing that general fund. Robin, would you care to address any questions from the CRA Governing Board?
Does this completely catch us up and there's no more past payments?
There's no other reimbursements from previous years that I can locate that would be applied to a reimbursement. So no payments are due, and this doesn't represent payments, but from a reimbursement, going back to be able to look at the charges passed through the general fund from Little John and various organizations. These represent what I can find located in the finance system in HTE tagged to CRA.
All right. Any other questions? All right. So the action that will be needed will be at the June 6th meeting, and that's where the CRA Advisory Board will adopt a mid-year budget adjustment resolution number 102-16. All right. Part 2, we're going to talk about the fiscal year 16-17 CRA direction. Previously in the month, we mailed out a email to y'all that outlined some of the projects you could consider for implementation for fiscal year 2016-2017. I don't know if y'all remember getting this information in the email. And it outlined several broad-based functions and activities of the CRA, including administrative functions, support for Oviedo on the Park, support for community-oriented policing programs, facade grant program, and connections to trails, paths, and parks. These were some of the projects presented for consideration by the CRA Governing Board for inclusion in the 16-17 budget. When we assign a dollar amount to those items, in the next slide, these are working budget numbers. For administration of the CRA, we had $8,000 allocated for city staff, $42,000 for technical professional consulting services, and $28,600 as a portion of a CRA plan update that we'll talk about in greater detail later. For support of Oviedo on the Park, we had $220,000 for maintenance and upkeep of CRA investment in public infrastructure and public amenities. We also have a proposed working budget amount of $65,000 placed in there for supporting of community-oriented policing programs within the CRA. The facade grant program we have allocated for $25,000 in the working budget. And then connections to trails, paths, parks, the planning and design aspect, we have $76,000 allocated there. The total proposed CRA budget for fiscal year 16-17, utilizing these working numbers, comes out to about $464,000. We've had the opportunity to speak with the property appraiser's office to get some preliminary taxable value data with regards to where we stand with our TIF right now. And based on the preliminary data that is going to be released on June 1st or possibly this Friday, it anticipates or estimates that next year's TIF revenue that may be available for projects is somewhere around $390,000. So this year was about $270,000. Next year it's going to be about $390,000. So those are the items that are presented right now. I'd like to open it up for discussion, or we can just continue through the presentation and then do the discussion at the very end of the presentation.
Anybody have things they want to bring up about this, discuss about this, any issues on it? Go ahead, Tim.
Maintenance and upkeep of the Oviedo on the park. Can you catch me up as to why that wouldn't be a general expense for the city, and why is it in the CRA?
Very good. The Oviedo on the Park is the cornerstone for the Oviedo CRA. It is located in the southern portion of that CRA and is one of the largest TIF generators for the CRA. There's significant public infrastructure that has been installed there as an amenity, as an inducement to encourage additional private sector investment in the area. And so in order to maintain that investment, maintain the value of that investment, and to further encourage additional reinvestment in the area, that is why CRA funds are being used to fund maintenance and upkeep of those amenities.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Tim, are you done?
I struggle to see how this should be in the CRA. But I'm new, and I'll listen and learn, but it seems like the city should have this in their budget without the CRA involved.
Ms. Mayor?
Well, I was going to piggyback exactly on what Tim brought up.
Okay.
Matter of fact, if he hadn't jumped out there, I would have jumped out there with it. I mean, when I saw that there, support for Oviedo on the Park, I would need a lot more definition on what that exactly is.
Okay.
Support for community-oriented policing programs within the CRA, we're taking expenditures and putting them into CRA funds. The CRA funds, in my mind, have always been for capital improvement. Trails, the trails to connect from the north to the south, perfect. Facade program, perfect. Redevelopment plan update, okay, fine. That's something that has to be done. I don't know if I have an issue with that, but those other two, I got to almost kind of agree with Tim, but I'm willing to listen to more information.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I have a question and then a couple comments. In looking at the redevelopment plan, it kind of lays out, and I don't know if it's a budgetary number we can move around. It's got certain amounts in certain years, and obviously it didn't play out that way. But for example, community policing is in there, I think, at $10,000 a year. But there's some things in there that I think we can also spend money on. So really, I guess the question is, within the redevelopment plan, do we have to alter the plan to shift monies around? That's a question for you. Can we shift monies around within the redevelopment plan if we're performing functions in the plan? Or do we have to revise the plan to do it?
I think we'd have to just revise the budget, would we not? Just like
We
did?
can shift
Just
funds.
like we were done.
Correct.
Yeah,
All right.
we'd have to just
In
revise
that
the budget.
event, to follow on what Mr. Slattery and Mr. Mayor said, I have some discomfort with anything that looks like and smells like general government expenditures, because the statute pretty clearly says don't spend money on those things. It also says don't spend money on things that were in the capital plan within 3 years of the creation of the CRA. But there's things in the redevelopment plan that I don't think the city had in their capital plan that there are expenditures for now that I think might be a good target. For example, we've got this streetscape design on 419, which I don't think was capital funded until recently. So notwithstanding that it would be a hit to the general fund to move this 220, I think if you free up those capital dollars by directing what we're doing toward infrastructure that'll bring more growth. There's something else in there, and I don't have any particular pieces in mind, but sometimes when proceeding toward projects, these little snippet pieces that are left out either for road widenings or so forth are a big pain in the neck, and one of the things in here is set aside funds to get those pieces, which the CRA, could then sell to facilitate projects. So the trail thing, I support. Community policing, I'm not so sure. The 220, I think we can direct that toward infrastructure that'll bring more growth, which will then feed more CRA money, which is, I think, what we're trying to do. That's just my observation. Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
I agree with everything that's been said. I think it's been well said by Dave and Tim and Mayor. I agree with the maintenance and upkeep. It should not be in there, nor support for community-oriented policing programs. I'm not sure exactly what that means. So I just agree with everybody said.
Can I get a clarification from maybe Robert? If I read the 390K estimate for 70 and 270K for 16, 390K for 17, I'm sorry. That's what we have available that, let me ask you this, what did we reimburse the general fund this year? What was that amount?
The total reimbursement is $250 for all prior years. Approximately, it's $258,000, I believe, is the exact number. So that's coming forward from 2005-06 up through 2013-14. Since then, in current year, we have it assigned accordingly, correctly charged to fund CRA 105 and fund general fund. So that brings us through 13-14, 258, 317.
Okay. And what about 15, 16? You know that?
We have that set up correctly in the correct fund, so there will not be a reimbursement due back to the CRA at that point in time.
Does that exceed that 270, 15 and 16, with the reimbursement of 258?
Does it exceed the 270?
The 258 plus the 15 and 16 expenditures, will that exceed the 270K that is available this year?
No, sir.
It won't? I see 258 up to 14.
Yeah, the 258,
That's reimbursement, right?
right, in the bank, right, so to speak, in the CRA funds at this point in time, we have received about, we've actually received a little more than the 270. So, and what we will do is we readjust what we originally had in the budget so that we're just recognizing the revenue that came in only. So we're only using the revenue that came in for the general fund, the revenue that came in from the county, our portion of it, and some interest. And then we're saying, okay, out of that amount, we can pay back the general fund. And that was it. There was still $3,000 roughly that I couldn't reimburse the general fund with, but we said, okay, that's what we can do comfortably and still leave a few dollars, the $25,000 into CRA. So we did not expend all the funds that were out there.
So I think what I'm reading here with this 464,000 proposed budget, we have a little bit of a deficit on what we were expecting to receive. Is that correct?
In the proposed from Mr. Jones, the 390, I haven't seen all the numbers from the property appraiser, so I can't fully answer that, but there's a difference between the 464 and the 390.
Okay.
Correct.
That's what we need to reconcile on June 6th?
Well, that actually will reconcile between June 6th and August 22nd. You can do that in the next 2 work sessions.
Okay. All right, clear as mud. Thanks.
Sorry, sir.
Mr. Rankin?
John, I have
Yes,
before
sir.
I comment on what was heard, I just have a quick question.
Yes, sir.
When you talk about support for Oviedo on the park, O'Brien, you can weigh in on this. You know, before I would say no, because I'm kind of leaning to where I heard the other comments made, but why did you put that in there, and why would you not want that to be part of when we do our budget stuff? What's the difference between this and that, or is this the easier route to
There was
get some of that
a
done?
precedent that these funds had been used in the past to support some of the infrastructure installation in the park, in the Oviedo on the Park project.
Are we talking about people, though? I'm talking about employees, taking employees, recurring costs out of the CRA to pay for extra people in the park to work. Is that what some of this details?
Correct. It'd be payment for a portion of the employee's time that is spent at the maintenance and upkeep of Oviedo on the Park. So I do not know if it involves an entire new position that has been created or only allocating for a portion of the time of a position that has been used for that purpose.
Right.
If that makes sense?
I get you. Well, I'm going to have to tend to agree with everything I heard here. I mean, that's
Okay.
our job to take care of the
Mhm.
people, and a recurring expense. The CRA, as everybody knows in generalities, is to brighten up a blighted area. Not that Oviedo on the Park is blighted, but it is the driver for everything else. So I'm going to tend to agree
Okay.
that one really probably should not. I don't have any problem with any of the other stuff. The policing thing, you know, that also comes back to, it probably shouldn't be in here, but I will say in generalities, when we do the budget, we cannot continue to grow the city and have more areas that have to be covered and not have more offices. One of the draws for Oviedo, and anybody will tell you, I can walk there in any street any night and I'm safe. But if we keep building stuff and we don't protect it, that's a problem. So I think those two are probably shouldn't be here. It's something we have to address in the next work session. So
Understood.
I would agree with what I've heard here from my colleagues.
So I think what I'm hearing, we're going to have to, for the June 6th, I think we're kind of already setting up some of the things we're going to need for the June 6th, is basically what's allowed by the CRA, so we're all fully aware as to what is allowed and what isn't allowed from the CRA, and then a breakdown, so we're all, make sure we all understand the breakdown of what this is on these issues, the support for Oviedo Park, community policing. It seems like the facade grant is a great program.
Well, they should break it all down.
I mean, they should break it all up, but we may not have as big a discussion on those. But for the support for the Oviedo Park, community policing, and even the administrative functions, have that broken out for us. That way, we're ready to go through that in more detail, and again, have a little direction in what is allowed, and make sure maybe even what's commonly done. I know the 1792 CRA, Altamont. Maybe have just a brief understanding is what they do also, but definitely what's allowed, so we understand to make sure that we are compliant with everything we do, but also what would be the norm for the areas too. Is that suitable for everybody?
Good.
Sounds like the right thing?
Can I bring up one more item?
Sure.
And this is to piggyback on Mr. Axel. You know, the streetscaping on 419, you know, as we get into it, you know, again, capital improvement, big function of the CRA, but what about reimbursement to the city for the streetscaping that we're putting in on 434 in Franklin? That should come back from the CRA to the city, to the general funds, or the sales tax funds, or whichever fund we took it out of, so that we can then use that throughout the rest of the city.
Right.
I mean, the CRA is here specifically for this area. And we're putting in nearly $1.5 million, $2 million with the streetscaping, upgraded lights, brick, up and down 434 in Franklin. And, you know, that money should come out of the CRA back to
Right.
whichever general fund pocket it came out of.
I don't disagree. I think exactly.
Now, whether
Those are
that's
the points we have to
statutorily
hit.
allowed, I don't know.
I was just going to say, if we could ask staff,
Right.
that certainly makes sense, but if
Right.
it doesn't fit the three-year rule.
Well, exactly.
Another example, which I know wasn't in the capital plan, is we've got the Wood Street connection that you're working on right now. That could be funded out of this. And that makes some sense. And one last thing I want to suggest, this year's the first year there's increment money. This year we're working on is just the second year. If we can make minor adjustments to the redevelopment plan by, let's say, adding Wood Street or adding Franklin Street or whatever it may be, and just do it, I don't think we need to expend a large percentage of our funds we have now on rewriting the plan until we get a little operational experience under our belts and see how this stuff's going to flow. So notwithstanding last meeting, I said, gee, should we have a new plan?
You were all about that at the last
I know,
meeting.
but before we start spending $50,000 out of 400, maybe if we can just make minor adjustments as we go on, say, let's add Wood Street, let's add Franklin Street reimbursement, whatever it may be. And-
Some low-hanging fruit
Right.
that's sitting there.
And facade grants sound wonderful, but is it really going to bring more development? I don't know.
Those are kind of like obligatory in every single CRA.
Yeah.
It's not
Do we
utilized.
do
it's
we
not
want
utilized.
infrastructure or warm fuzzies, you know?
You gotta
Yeah.
Do you?
have success stories along the way.
I like warm fuzzies.
Never noticed that.
That bank could use some painting. Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
So I've got also identifying new projects, possibly, staff or if you think of something outside the meeting, get to Brian, John, any new project you think you have, oh, you know what, that could probably be one either right now or in the near future. Throw that up for the June 6th also.
John, do you have all that?
Got it.
All right.
Got it. All
I
right.
think Mr. Cobb's got notes, so.
Yeah.
All right, part two We've received the direction regarding the CRA Advisory Board, what you all want to see at the 6th on June. So the action that's going to be needed at the 6th is to adopt a budget resolution for fiscal year 16-17. I will come with a resolution that will have a menu of different projects from which you may choose and select for adoption.
So we're going to see that and vote on it all in one night?
Yes, sir.
Is that the plan?
At least, is that the initial or no? That's just the initial, right?
Typically, yes, it would be presented, and then you would have a chance to, I mean, you have to meet again as the board, and we're going to adopt it a different night. So, but the budget's actually not even presented to the city council until July, so you typically can't really adopt it. You can do it from a CRA perspective on that night, but I would suggest having that meeting we discussed in August and actually adopt what's been presented at the June in August. So that you have a chance to look at it, and it may change a little bit with the regular general fund budget that you may wish to adjust for.
I think we're going to have a little more squeeze time.
Yeah, effectively
Into this
you
meeting on June 6th.
you get 3 bites at the apple with the CRA budget. You get one as a CRA when you establish your resolution outlining your general program objectives for that year, and then you get 2 bites at it as the city council approving the CRA's budget. You guys are the ultimate arbiters of the CRA's budget.
And the part 3, why update the CRA plan? I know we were just kind of discussing that, so we have consensus to look at it right now, like David said. Short term, look at some projects and kind of put this off, updating the CRA plan as part of this budget immediately. Again, we seem to be a shortfall anyway, so it'll move a large portion out almost immediately to us. But kind of getting some understanding under our belts for the next year, put in some new projects and shift around at this next meeting, learn the next year how it all works out, and then possibly next year look at updating the CRA plan long term. Does that sound like a...
Well, that's fine, and I think Tim just brought up the excellent points to make tonight, but, you know, we need a good success story out there, so people see it and they want to invest in it, you know, roads to most people are not success stories, although we need them, but we need something out there that looked really bad and now looks really good. That should be, you know, something we can show people. This is why you want to come, this is what happens, and we're on top of it, not just doing stuff that nobody, not that they don't care about it, but something that we can...
Or, with putting off the CRA plan, the cost of the CRA plan until next year, basically.
Yeah.
Looking at it as projects this year, getting us some projects down. Keith, you look like you had something.
I only had a question on stormwater improvements, if those are considered, allowable in this, and if we have any. I'm not sure if
They are, yeah.
I think it's in the redevelopment plan,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah.
Master stormwater.
Yeah. Do we have any plans for the near future?
Mr. Cobb can explain that.
In that area, yes. There's a plan for a master system in that area so that we're not doing individual little ponds all over the downtown area. We're doing a master system. So.
Be available for next year possibly, but...
Okay, just top of my head, sorry.
But we could always add it as a budget adjustment if we need to during the year. We could budget
could.
adjustment in.
Yes.
But that's, like I said, if there are any other of those kind of things that we think of, that's great for next meeting to make sure we bring forward so that we can make sure we're addressing them or at least putting them on the table so that if they start coming forward as the year goes on, we can budget them in and amend it.
Good.
Anything else, John? Have I hit all your things for you? You got anything else to...
You've hit it. You've hit it.
Just quickly,
Mr. Mayor?
as far as long-term planning, though, I mean, you know, it's nice to put off a plan because you don't want to spend money, but if you don't have a plan, you don't have a roadmap to follow, and if you don't have a roadmap to follow, staff doesn't know what to implement. And then we change our mind here. So,
I'm not advocating. I'm definitely advocating we have to do it.
okay, I just want to make sure.
I think we need to, again, allocate time for next meeting, that we're going to be putting in some time here, at least, an hour and a half. We're going to be in this meeting looking at what we foresee on the next
These
two
meetings
weeks.
need to take on importance, not be the
Right.
5-minute little
Yeah,
update
and that's what I'm
because there's
saying.
nothing to update.
It's not, we got to talk about the June 6th meeting before we get out of here, but we need to allocate real time for this meeting to go over this in a proper manner and go in depth that we've just been asking for. And that will give it, and that will really be the determiner as do we need a full plan or have we hit enough that we've put enough on our plate for the year that gets us to next year. And again, if we need to mid-year adjust it and add that plan, that's something we have to do, then that's what we can do at that point.
I'm fine with that.
But next meeting on the 6th, that's something, we have a council, at 6:30? That night?
Assuming.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
It's regular
We need
meeting.
here
It's regular meeting.
CRA at 5, 6.
We're going to have to, what are we going to do, guys? Because that's, I said, we're not, half an hour is not going to do it. I mean, that's the reality, is we're going to have to at least,
5 o'clock?
I said at least an hour, but realistically, put an hour
That
and a half.
becomes hard for Keith.
That's going to be hard for it to go for Keith, that's
The banker is no problem.
5 o'clock.
5 o'clock's late for him.
So 5 o'clock on the 6th, everybody could manage that currently?
Yes, sir.
John? we
Yes,
good?
sir.
Okay. And that will give us a good amount of time to work with this and get things done.
Now we make another suggestion.
Sure.
We're going to have to move them eventually to their
We
own
are.
night.
We are going to have to move to
Because
the
it's unfair to us as members to be here at 5, go through an hour and a half workshop, and then sit down and be expected to do another hour and a half meeting.
I agree.
We
Just
know it- we
vote
know-
yes on everything at the council meeting.
Yeah.
Go
yeah.
quick.
We know it's going to happen at about 7:30 in that council meeting.
But no, I agree. This is going to have to take on the important, again, this is grown.
I've seen that Snickers commercial.
This has grown and taken on the importance now this year. We've seen it, and it's starting to be, I'll say real. It's starting to have a real venture, so you have to treat it that way.
It sounds like we're on the same page.
Anything else, guys? Good. Good to the order, as the mayor always says at the end of his meeting?
Good deal. I don't know, John
John,
has
anything
about
else
50
for you?
slides here.
Yeah, I mean, we
Sorry, I read through
can,
your slides.
that's all right, that's pretty good, that's pretty
Trying to get
good.
us done so we can get the next meeting, but still maintain and get everything done.
Not a problem,
If nothing
sir.
else, then I'll have a CRA meeting.
Wait, let's just see what he's got there. John, anything
let's-
else? He's flipping through his stuff.
Let's see, let's see, that's update plan. All right, so, the general consensus for the June 6th budget workshop. We were going to talk about the CRA Advisory Board to adopt the mid-year budget adjustment resolution for 15-16. We were also going to talk about authorizing Little John to update the CRA plan, which has been struck. We won't talk about that. The CRA Board allocate $25,000 for plan update. That is struck. CRA Board to adopt Budget Resolution 15-16 for the proposed projects, and the 28.6 for completion of plan update has been struck. So 3 of those items will be at the next June 6th meeting at 5 p.m.
And we need breakdowns, John, on what that 220 was going to be for and what the 65K
Yes, sir.
was going to be for.
You got it.
John, what about number 4? What
Yep.
about number 4 in here?
Yeah.
This continuing service.
Contract,
thing.
yep, I'm sorry, continuing service contracts.
Not a problem.
What's the last thing?
Yes.
So,
Needs to go out to bid.
let's see. The Little John contract is set to expire on July 1st of this year with regards to administration of the CRA. The city has an opportunity to issue an RFP to solicit a consultant to continue that work, or you also have the option to piggyback on an existing continuing services agreement contract that we have with other municipalities. And so it is at the pleasure of the board that Ms. Hayes will present this item
Go ahead,
in greater
Robert.
detail.
Our purchasing agent, Ms. Vivian, has looked into the city of Sanford as an option for us to be able to piggyback. We have presented their contract in attachment 3 and 4. So it was competitively bid. We have that information available. I believe there were 19 different cities that bid on the contract, and that information can be made available to anyone who would like to see that. In attachment 4, where Sanford actually went out for the bid. They have very similar services, and we would encourage a work order with a scope of services to be issued to Little John Engineering for the services that the board would desire. And at this time, the Sanford contract does not actually have a completion date, an ending date, so it would continue on from year to year unless your work order specifies some type of completion date or ending date. And I'm not sure if the city manager, Mr. Cobb, would like to make any other statements.
No, when we looked at the Sanford contract, we felt that it was something that we could piggyback on. One of the discussions that I had with John is that I think that with the work that he's already done for the CRA, his knowledge of the CRA, that it's good that we continue his service with it. I think we would lose a lot of institutional knowledge and talent by going out and doing our own RFP. The Sanford contract was competitively bid. It was very popular. Had a lot of response to it, and a lot of qualified response to it. And so, in looking at it and having, since it passed all the different tests that we put it through when we go to consider piggybacks, we think it would be best that we move forward with it, especially given that our current contract will be expiring soon. Because we just did an extension just to get us through so that we could do this investigation. And so that was one of the things that we would recommend that we go forward with the piggyback.
The task orders would have a definite completion date, right?
Yes, sir. If you remember with the work orders that we have done with John in the past, we usually do them annually. We'll come in and we do a new one. That way we can establish a new scope of services. We can establish a new budget, basically, is how we looked at it. And so we would continue that practice.
Is this something you need a motion on from us tonight, or is this something that the city council actually approves?
June 6th, we're going to take a motion. That's right.
We'll bring it to you for June 6th, and then actually we're going to hit both on June 6th. That's what we'll do.
But any questions on it?
The bids that Sanford got
Yes, sir.
with the prices and all the qualifications, where do we see those?
We can do them.
I can make those available to you, sir.
Listen, you guys know how I feel about that. I know you have your process, but it's very hard for me, and John does a great job, and John will probably be here for a long time, but, when you guys bid stuff, I need to see the whole picture. I want to see the scale of different prices, because when we just did one that we got involved in, the prices were all over the place, and, to make a good decision, you got to see it all.
But we'll make that available and put it out there to you by the end of the week. We have to go through the public records request through the City of Sanford and actually pay for that. But
Right.
we've got that set up, ready to do. We just needed to.
I'm sure Sanford did a great job, but when we were asked to do that visioning thing, they were all over the place, and some were really good and some were really bad. So I'd like to see it.
Okay, I'll make that available and send it to all the board members.
Yeah.
Well, wait. We have to pay to get the public records?
Yes, we do, sir.
Okay, well then, I don't want all 19 of them. Just get whatever the top 3 were.
I'd say they wouldn't go down.
Can we just get the name of the company and what their price was? Is that
Their executive summary. Can you get their executive summary?
Yeah.
Whatever they
I'll
kind of
call
thing.
tomorrow and find out.
Yeah.
Right.
I know Ms. Vivian checked on it, and she had stated, I believe she stated $500 is what they were going to charge to send all of the records over to us as a public records request. So
Can't we just pull it from their online agenda and be done with it?
Yeah.
I will check it out tomorrow.
They probably don't show it well. They should.
Yeah, we should.
Should see.
They might not have the price.
They may not have the whole thing.
Right.
I know our city attorney, Mr. Groot, actually checked this contract with Sanford. He was also part of that one, so he may even have a copy of some of that. So let me check that route also.
Yeah, before we just go out and spend money on getting copies of stuff, let's.
Okay.
Right.
And then I'll send it to the board as soon as we have
And you
something.
need that on June 6th, too.
The approval of that process, yes, sir. I will have that information out to you this week as quickly as I can get it.
Cool. Very good.
Thank you.
Ron, usually when we do these highly IQ things in the rocket bracket, we leave it open-ended as far as date, but we put a maximum value on it. Does this have a maximum value?
And not to exceed, the work order does, so the work order, we can write it very specifically, not to exceed a dollar amount. We can write it not to exceed the scope that you wish. There's 3 to 4 provisions in there, and we would present that according to the desires of the board, so.
But that's the task order. What about the whole contract?
The contract does not actually have a dollar value says to it. Sanford actually does work orders also, and they do a work order based on that. The contract was set up with the scope of services in general. So that's the reason that my understanding is there's different bids on it based on the city of Sanford's request at that point in time. And John can probably clarify that since he's already part of that contract.
Correct. The Sanford Continuing Services contract basically keeps the Little John team in the Sanford City toolbox for use on special projects as needed. We prepare scopes and present them to them for their consideration. So every single task is budgeted and time scheduled. So at every task option, when you want to have something done, there will be a specific budget created for that task and a specific schedule for completion.
Anything else?
Good.
Anything else for you?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
I was like, you're getting up again. I'm like, I missed something. With that, I'll call the meeting closed.